Welcome to A Layer Deeper. Today, we're going to be talking about Psalm 70. This is a Psalm of David. Um, it says here, this is a New Living Translation I'm using, just because it translates this one part kind of fun. Um, for the choir director, a Psalm of David asking God to remember him. This one says, Director of Music of David, a petition. So, you know, interesting they translate that differently, but we're gonna go over this. This is like just a little short psalm here. I'm reminded of one of the things that Jesus says, right? That when you pray, God already knows what you're gonna ask for, right? And Jesus even talks about not doing things for vain repetition. That being said, this is a psalm that I do like to pray once in a while. Not a lot, but I do think it's a good prayer, especially if you're going through something. It's kind of a good led prayer. If David himself wrote this, God said David was a man after his own heart, and God showed up many ways in David's life, very strongly. And for him to write these things, asking God to rescue, to come quickly, and all these things. I think David, even though he did some very silly stuff, was very spiritually wise. When you look at some of the things that David did and said in prayer with God, and even with Moses, I'm reminded of the time that Moses he went before God because God said he was going to kill all the Israelites in the wilderness, and he said, God, what will the people think that you brought your people out of Egypt with all these signs and wonders just to kill them? One of the things that you start to realize when you start to get deeper and more mature in the spiritual things with God is that God can change his mind. So, prayer is just very important. And this is one of those verses where you kind of see David asking God to change his mind, which he does a lot, and tries to kind of move God's heart and move his decisions in a certain direction. And it's something that people, when you start to spend more time and get deeper in with God, you start to realize, even Jesus himself, went every morning and every night to pray, right? If Jesus did that, and you see, how powerfully God works in everything that Jesus did. I know he's God, right? But even look at Daniel, for example, right? Daniel prayed 3 times a day, and he was one of the wisest people in the land, and he still prayed 3 times a day, right? So I'm just saying this kind of to convict you, if you think, oh, God's got me, I don't need to pray, I don't need to do anything, like all of these very, very mighty, very powerful people prayed consistently, so I just want to say this for anybody, who's not, doesn't have like a strong prayer life or concrete times they set apart for prayer, just to kind of, convict you to say, who are you that you don't pray when all these mighty men constantly prayed to God and constantly worked with God to try and like help change their situation. Okay, so this is kind of a psalm that I like to pray, sometimes at night or whatever, especially if there's anything, any issues that I'm dealing with in life. It's just something that's always given me a lot of peace, and I always, feel the presence of God a lot with it. So we're going to go ahead and read through this and hopefully get a little bit deeper in this one. Please, God, rescue me. Come quickly, Lord, and help me. May those who try to kill me be humiliated and put to shame. May those who take delight in my trouble be turned back in disgrace. Let them be horrified by their shame. For they say, aha, we've got him now. I chose a New Living Translation because of this part here. In most places it just says aha, aha, which is a Hebrew word that's kind of weird here. Forgive me, I'm just a Strong's lexicon Hebrew person. I don't speak Hebrew. I'm assuming it's hayak. I'm just guessing. But you can see these are public displays of mourning, such as funerals during times of national crisis, reflecting sorrow, distress. So I think essentially what this is saying here is when people are kind of rejoicing in your distress. So when we look at this, he's asking God to rescue. He's asking God to come quickly. Because people are trying to kill him. And he's asking, may they be humiliated and put to shame. Those who take delight in my trouble. and let them be horrified because they're saying, aha, we've got him now, or kind of as I showed, like they're rejoicing in that fact that you're in distress, that you're in pain, that there's something bad going on that's worthy of mourning in your life, right? They're rejoicing at that. And then he goes on to say the other part, but may all who search for you be filled with joy and gladness in you. May those who love your salvation repeatedly shout, God is great. But as for me, I am poor and needy. Please hurry to my aid, O God. You are my helper and my Savior, O Lord. Do not delay. One of the other Psalms, I believe it says, you know, I don't remember the exact reference. I'm going to kind of paraphrase here, but it kind of says that like God keeps keeps remembrance of all your tears. Right. So one of the things that you kind of realize, especially in the Psalms of David, is David really kind of cries out and almost kind of overdoes it, but he gets super deep and super emotional in his heart when he prays, because he's really trying to just call out on God from the deepest place. But you see some of the things, David was, on the run a lot. He was in caves. He was constantly surrounded by armies bigger than him, people with more resources and more power, that were always after him. And he had nothing, there's nothing he could do but cry out from God. So he's a great person to really kind of learn to seek that, that deep unction, that deep connection within yourself, to really cry out for God. But I do think it's cool how he kind of, you can see kind of how he negotiates with God in prayer, right? He's saying, let these people be horrified by their shame because they're just, he's basically kind of saying that these people are trying to kill him, kind of assuming that they're a little bit unrighteous here, and that, all who search for you should be filled with joy and gladness. May those who love your salvation repeatedly shout, God is great, right? So kind of, please help me because I love you and these people are after me to try and kill me, So I really love, the Psalms of David. I've just read them enough now that like I start reading a psalm, and whether I read the top or not, saying it's a Psalm of David, you can tell pretty quickly, just because of the way that he speaks with God. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that and a lot to be learned. So, I pray, if you're ever in a situation, where you need God to help you or whatever, go ahead and remember this psalm. I like praying this one aloud at night, but also just remember, these kind of underlying structures in the Psalms and in some of the prophets of how they kind of negotiate with God and, bring to remembrance to God that, hey, we're your people, we delight in you and your glory, and these people, there's people out there after us who don't, who just want to see us, in trouble and are rejoicing in the fact that we're falling. So I think it's always just a really good thing to do. One of the things that I bring up sometimes, the devil, it says he was an anointed cherubim, meaning he was standing in the presence of God. So one of the things about God's creations that we notice is that they are actually able to forget about God. It seems to be one of the innate features, right? That we're able to forget about God, that we're able to do things that are contrary to God, right? It's something that's possible for us. So it's pretty interesting that, the devil, Satan, whoever you want to call him, Lucifer, was an anointed cherubim in the presence of God, in heaven, and he thought that he could ascend higher and kind of designed a coup, if you will, with some of the other angels, against God, and he was cast out of heaven. We don't know the full story or anything, but it's just interesting that we as his creation can tend to forget sometimes, and it seems God sometimes, if you look at how the prophets pray, and even David here, he can sometimes forget, because of his anger over something or whatever. There's a lot of chatter. There's a lot of fights in the spiritual world, right? So it's always good to ask God to kind of remember you and ask him to come quickly and ask him to help you, as David does here. And I think all those things are very wise. right, and I want to try and keep these short, so that's at about 10 minutes. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little thing over Psalm 70, and let me know what you think.